This is wholeness. All there is wholeness. This is complete. It doesn't need to go anywhere, and it didn't come from anywhere. It is the infinite arising as this. It is formlessness in form. It's a boundless energy. That boundless energy can and is everything. So there's only really energy arising as everything. This is energy appearing as this. Because energy is completely free and wild and chaotic and ordered, it can also be limited. It can be anything. So it also arises as apparent separation. And that apparent separation seems to arise in the human being. So the human being, at a very early age, suddenly has a sense of identity, as though it's a separate subject, and everything else in the world is an object that arises from it. So directly that separation arises, so a story begins. It's called, for me, I like to call it, the story of me. The story of me begins, time begins, and there's a sense, as I say, of there being something here with a world out there of lots of other somethings. So there's a subject-object sense. There's a subject here, and everything else is an object. That's the reality which seems to arise for me. And it's an artificial reality, but for me it seems to be very real. And what also seems to be real is the idea that me, the person, the self, has free will and choice. And lives in a world that is absolutely in a state of cause and effect. So cause and effect is part of the artificial reality of me. And everything for the me seems to be real. It's fixedly real. I am something, there's lots of somethings out there, and those somethings are real. They're real objects that are actually happening to me in my life. It's my experience of them. They arise as my experience, in a sort of train of experiences. So the me is travelling around in a circle, going from one experience to the next experience to the next experience. Me is living in what's next. But what also arises in that experience is the sense of being separate from everything. And so what can happen is a sense of dissatisfaction can arise in the reality of me, because everything else seems to be apart from me. And so there's a sense of unfulfillment about that. And for many people, or for some people more and more now, there's a question as to why it is like that. People look for something more fulfilling than being in a separate world. And so they might move to religion or therapy or enlightenment or whatever to find the answer to that sense of dissatisfaction. But the difficulty is that the me is an artificial construct, and it lives in its own artificial reality. And it also lives in a finite world. So everything that's happening to this me is in a finite world. And what it looks for, what it longs for, it doesn't necessarily even recognise. When it thinks about enlightenment, it doesn't really know what that is. When it thinks of the kingdom of heaven, which is the promise of Christianity, it doesn't know what that is. It doesn't have any idea of what it longs for, because what it longs for can't be known in the finite world. Because what it longs for is the infinite, is the timeless. And so it tries as hard as it can to find that, and it might go to a teacher who seems maybe to have found something, and it tries to learn how to take a path towards something in the future called fulfillment. But the difficulty with that teaching and that lesson is that again it's on a circle going round in a series of events. So the student may learn to meditate and experience a state of peace sometimes, or stillness. The student may learn to self-inquire and learn states of increasing knowledge, the dropping away of so-called ignorance, and the development of a sense of detachment. That can be a state that can come and go, and that can be mistaken for a sense of enlightenment, because detachment brings a sort of sense of freedom. And all the time that the student, me, is travelling around in this separate reality, it can never ever be open to the sense of something that's infinite, because it only functions within the finite. Me and the story coexist, well, they exist as each other. Me can't live without the story, and the story can't exist without me. So the me can only function within the known world of its own, which is a finite world. So whatever it finds and seems to grasp or own is again finite, is again, it comes and goes, it's transient. Nothing can be held on to, there's nothing constant. It's just a set of experiences. So what we're sharing together today is the illumination of the dilemma of seeking. What we're sharing together today is the illumination of the myth of there being a me, and the myth of there being a story. In some way or other, we can share that together through talking together, sharing concepts together, and that's a fairly superficial part of this meeting. The most powerful part of this meeting is something that's energetic. Essentially, separation is the contraction of energy in the body. It's not a thought. Separation is not a thought or an idea or belief. It's energetic. It's energetically held. Just like fear, when fear arises, the whole body can be afraid. So separation is a subtle sense of living in a separate reality. So what can happen when that contracted sense of separation meets boundlessness is that it can melt back into the boundless, apparently. All of that's a story, all of that's an appearance. But the further we talk about this, so it becomes apparent that the separate reality is illusory, and there is another reality which I call natural reality, in which everything simply arises as it is.